Hey everyone, welcome back to the AI in Action podcast. I'm your host, Adima Zolkario, product design and AI expert, and the creator of the online leadership program, Unlocking the Power of Generative AI. And today, we're tackling a critical challenge for many startups: founder conflicts and decision making. Joining us is Amit Mittelman, a successful entrepreneur, lawyer, and expert in resolving startup conflict. We'll be exploring how to prevent conflict, develop effective strategies for resolving a disagreement, and make tough decisions that set startup for a long-term success. Get ready for an insightful conversation filled with practical tips and expert advice. Hi, Amit.
Hey, Adi, what's the very high expectations that you set up?
Yeah, this is like first I'm sure that you will be in the same like alignment with what we expect. And second, yeah, we want to make everyone engage and I'm sure that afterwards they will say, okay, he delivered. So
Okay,
Amit
awesome.
Mittelman, solving conflicts for startups. And now we can start because this is very interesting because I think that in most cases when people talk about startups and they talk about the technology and they talk about like VCs and all of that, they hardly speak about the emotional collaboration relationship aspect of startups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
and you know, if I can say one more thing, I think even the most avid, enthusiastic supporters of AI, even the guys that those that are like AI is going to replace everybody in 10 years, the dealing with emotions and with ego and with human conflict is maybe the one thing that AI is the most further away from solving. Like is the one thing that AI has the longest way to go before
yeah,
it can actually create value. So I think it's a
I
very
totally
important,
agree. It's like
yeah.
when we're thinking about Sam Altman and what's going on with his startup, then they started to throw the founder set aside, and the board said that he should go, and then everybody said he should
Yeah,
be back, and then everybody resigned. And like, of course, if they cannot solve it, so I think that nobody
yeah,
can within
exactly.
the AI aspect. So, what is the most common causes for founders conflict in startups?
I think everybody that ever worked in a team knows that the most basic, at the heart of everything, there's ego. And I want to say something. Ego is not, maybe if most of the listeners are Israelis, the phrase saying ego has kind of a negative association. When kids play football and one kid say to the other, you're egoistic, it means that you don't pass the ball. But in life, when part of being an adult is understanding that ego is not a bad thing. Ego is one of the most important drives that makes people excel, that make people work hard. Ego is a great thing that is a very important drive for many, many people. And you know what? Some of the best entrepreneurs I know have the biggest ego. That's great. But it's also a source of conflicts because if I want to feel that I make decisions, or I want other people to know that I make decisions, if I want to have something done my way, to have the company prioritize something that is important for me, those are the things that make people disagree. Eventually, in so many cases, you see that it's not the strategic thing that made people disagree. It's not the one strategic decision of choosing if to do a small seed round or a huge seed round. The important things, it's not those. Eventually, it's the small things that are the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves that make people disagree.
So I don't know if I mentioned, but you're a two-time and successful
Yeah,
entrepreneur
we
and
haven't talked
after
about my
exit.
experience, but
We didn't say that, but just could you tell us from your experience as a successful entrepreneur, after two exits, it's like you have this like stamp of success. What do you think you learned over the way? So if
yeah.
I met Amit before these two startups and today, how smarter, more smart you are right now?
Yeah, oof. I hope I'm much, much smarter because I was young and quite stupid. But yeah, I had two companies with the same co-founder, and the second company we had a third co-founder was the CTO. And I think that the number one lesson is that the in Hebrew say, can I use a phrase in Hebrew?
Sure.
To separate ikar and tafel.
Yeah.
The number
Yeah.
one thing is to separate what's what's strategic and important
the most
from
important.
what's not. Yeah. And eventually you look back and you say the biggest discussions, the most emotional discussions were not on super important things. Eventually you see we were three young men, a lot of ego and testosterone and motivation. We wanted to do good things and we wanted to succeed. And eventually you look back and you say, we wasted a whole week arguing about something that was such a nonsense. So the number one lesson I learned is to move as fast as you can away from the small things. It's not really important, my decision or your decision, my way or your way. Just make a decision and move on. And then try to focus on the big things.
Yeah, but it's like, as I see it, it's like sometimes when you're young and you don't have the experience, you don't even know what is the most important thing. Because you say, okay, this is something that might lead to a bigger influence than it really does. And when you're more experienced and more relaxed and focused, you could know that this is a big thing or not.
Yeah, I would, you know what? I would do two buckets. There are some things that you maybe, when you're inside, when you're at the moment, you're sure this could be strategic and it's important. And then if you use the right advice and you surround yourself with good people that have entrepreneurship experience, you get the good advice and they would tell you, you know what, it's not that important. That's one bucket. The other bucket, you know what, there are some things that we wasted days arguing about. And even at the moment, I think we knew they are not strategic. But this is the magic of youth, You're inside something and you're at the moment and you're sure that if you don't convince the other person that he needs to sign that email, nothing would go right. So there are two buckets. There's something that even at the moment, if you stop for 1 second, you're like, hey, that's not really important.
Yeah.
But that would lead me to the second thing that I think is very important for first-time entrepreneurs is to get the right advice, to get someone with meaningful, successful entrepreneurship experience around them. We were lucky after more than maybe 2 years of doing all the possible mistakes. We were lucky to meet a few angels that invested in our company and were very, very beneficial for our success. Very important for our success.
Yeah. And what do you think they gave you in the aspect of, like, first it could be connections, it could be the knowledge of the the industry, whatever, but in the connection of conflicts or decision making, what did you learn from them?
I think the connections are the 10th most important thing you get from angels, really, honestly. For me, it's first of all, if we're talking about human conflicts, human challenges, the first thing you get from good angels is the emotional support. It's the ability to call someone at 1 a.m. and say, hey, I messed up this deal. I don't think we can get back this customer. I did a mistake. And then someone on the other side of the phone will tell you, hey, I did the same mistake. And everybody does that. And that's part of life and you'll bounce back. That's the most important thing. The second most important thing is really this advice of like, hey, this is strategic. Let's focus on that. Maybe you should go that way. And hire this person, don't hire this person, take money from that investor or not, or try to shift your pricing or, big, good, important advice. And some connections, that's always good. Motivation, someone that will like help you dream big. That was a big thing for us because we had two companies I mentioned. The first one was a service company. So it was a business. We were generating income from day one, but we were playing the small game, we sold the company that when it had $1 million in revenue, but it wasn't recurring. It wasn't software based. And that's a different game from a SaaS startup that when it has $1 million in revenue, it can get to a valuation of 50 million. So when you get the right angels, they help you dream big and they help you envision what the big boys can think of.
Yeah. So what kind of techniques to resolve these conflicts founders need to know?
Yeah. I'm happy that you're taking me back to the subject that I most like.
Yeah.
So first of all, when founders work together, they develop dynamics. The first thing you can do as an outsider that is trying to help people is to figure out the dynamics. Some of that are useful. Sometimes they have their own way to make decisions. So sometimes you can leverage the dynamics that they already created. But let's talk about the cases where the dynamic is broken, when people cannot anymore create a useful discussion, and you don't trust each other. Maybe you're already at the point that everything the other party does is a bit annoying. So at that point, first of all, I think the most important thing is to help people see the same set of facts. It's unbelievable to the extent that I meet people, they work in the same room, they have the same employee, the same investors, the same customers, and they see completely two separate realities. So the biggest challenge, the most important thing is to help people see the same reality. For example, you get one founder that would say, if I leave the company, all the employees leave with me.
Okay.
That's rarely the case. And then when you start talking about the things, sometimes a very important technique is you being kind of a rock in the room. Not an elephant in the room, a rock in the room. Sitting very calmly, you're not emotionally engaged. You're willing to hear and to listen to everything, including some emotional reactions, but you're very calm, and then the other person starts venting. Hey, if I'm going to leave the company, all the employees are going to live with me. And then you're like, okay, that sounds like very, very important for us to understand. Let's think about it. You have this employee and this employee. When you start drilling down to details, maybe not all of them are going to live with me. And then you help people get to understand the same set of facts. So that's one important thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to do very long answers, so maybe I'll stop it.
But I'll tell you, the first thing that comes to my mind is couples therapy.
Yeah, it's super similar.
Yeah, so it's very, very similar in that sense, because sometimes when you get mad, you say very big things and maybe hurtful things, and sometimes you're just emotional without thinking rationally. So what you're saying, okay, let's be rational in some of the cases.
Yeah.
But there is something else, because in couples, they have the option that one would go to the gym, the other one would go to work, and they don't have to do everything each day all the time together. In the case of founders and in the case of startup, first you need to be fast. Second, you need to make a decision each minute, more or less. So you have to collaborate. So you don't have lots of options in that case.
Yeah.
So you're coming to a situation that is already heated, and they don't have time to, okay, let's go and relax a bit, and I'll go with my friends, you go with yours.
I'll try to refer to that, but I want to first, you mentioned fast, and I want to say something. This is the most unbelievable, upsetting, terrible thing about mainstream solutions. When I hear founders that try to work with their lawyer to resolve their conflict, or try to go to, the traditional founder coaches and stuff like that. And I listen to people talking about a process of 6 months, a year, not even mentioning if you're going to court that can take 2 years. And when I talk to founders, I said the most important thing, the number one thing, the goal of this meeting is for you to get back to work. You're not here. It's not similarly to couple therapy. The goal is not to be together. The goal is for the company to succeed, whether you're together or not. The goal is for the company. This is a for-profit company, right? The goal is to make profit. So the goal is for you to finish this thing amicably and get back to work. Maybe together, maybe separately, maybe change positions, maybe shift roles and responsibilities, but the goal is to get back to making profit. So when I listen to people talking about the process of 6 months, it drives me crazy. My head explodes. I think the most important thing is to do it fast.
Yeah, and I think this is very different than in general seeing a process. In a process, you're saying, okay, we're going to understand what are the decisions, and maybe you would think about what is each one's responsibilities, and then maybe you would bring someone in to be part of whatever, and it's like a process. And when you're thinking about startups, they don't have the ability, or they don't have the privilege, actually, of doing these kinds of processes.
Exactly. But they do have the privilege to work intensively. And when I meet founders and we try to work, if it's a crisis, You do it every day for 2 weeks, and you're back to work.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
forgot to mention one more thing, that you're a lawyer too. So you have,
yeah.
yeah, and that's why I forgot to mention that usually lawyers, and doesn't matter, I'm going back to lawyers who are doing divorce, for example, agreements and so forth. Sometimes they go into the details of the details and they forget the main thing, as you mentioned, is like doing profits, making sure the startups will work, and especially if they have one side. So if I'm working only with the husband or only with one of the founders, I always agree to what he's saying and taking care only for his side. And when you're working with founders, the side of the company and the best side for what's going on for the business is not the same of each one of them differently.
Exactly. And if we mention getting to the same set of facts, sometimes you can stay working together. Sometimes one of the parties may be leaving but staying a shareholder. Sometimes during the process, again, I'm talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, one party will understand during the conversations that he is not the company anymore. And this is a very meaningful understanding. But I wanted to say something about being a lawyer. It gives me the benefit that I can promise discretion, I can promise immunity, I can promise that whatever information I get is protected by law. I can never share it with someone. That's very important for the parties. But I think a common mistake is thinking about the legal aspect. Eventually, creating a legally binding solution, that's not difficult. Any first-year lawyer can create it. You talk a lot about AI in your podcast. Creating the document is not the problem. Everybody that works in tech understands that creating a standard document is standard and easy.
Yeah.
The challenge is getting to a solution that everybody can live with. My goal is for people to leave my conversation, leave the process, and when I know that if they cross each other in the street, they don't cross to the other side. They shake hands and they're happy and they can live, they can sleep well at night. That's the goal for me.
Yeah, yeah. It's going back to the couples therapy. That's what's on my mind. I listen a lot to Esther Perel. You know Esther Perel?
Yeah.
you know and one thing that comes to my mind is maybe some founders are not really aware of the challenges ahead in many cases, and it's like to create a prenup agreement. You have founders agreement from the beginning, and sometimes the expectations from a founder agreement is that we will collaborate, work together, everything would be fine, and then we'll make more money as we go, right? And I think that most founders are not aware of what could be done on the way, what could be a challenge. What would you tell them? Like, should they expect in order to prevent the problem afterwards?
Yeah, so I think that's a very important, it's very useful to always compare to couples therapy. In a romantic relationship, you can expect that at the beginning, there's a lot of maybe physical attraction, romance that helps us overcome, something annoying that the other party did. And you can expect that when you create a mutual shared life, there will be a form of intimacy and love that will develop and help you realize that maybe the other party snores at night, but you still love them.
Right.
In a business relationship, it's very different. You are not going to have intimacy in that sense. You'll have other aspects of intimacy, but you should expect that you will grow as people separately. One of you might want to write a book, the other one might want to start hiking or start biking, or one of you would have a year in their life that they would want to work harder, and the other one maybe less so. You have to expect that you will grow as two separate individuals. The best thing to overcome all those changes is trust. If you trust the other party that, you know what, maybe during this time of his life, he needs to work a little bit less. Maybe he's having a child and he needs some time off, or he needs some relaxation time. He was under a lot of stress. To enable that to your partner, you need to trust each other. You need to trust that you say, I know that he's leaving the office early, but I trust him that he will answer the important emails, answer the important calls. He would be straightforward with me, and he will tell me that he needs a week off. Once the trust is broken, nothing will help anymore, right? So expect that you're going to grow separately. Expect pressure. Super important to expect pressure, to understand that you work in a high pressure environment, and know that you don't know almost nothing, and you're here to learn. There's a very important phrase. I forgot his name. The founder of LinkedIn and the fund Greylock, Reid Hoffman. He has a very important phrase that he says, unlearn, the ability to unlearn, the ability to forget what you know and learn new things on top of that. I think that's a very important skill for founders.
Okay, so you mentioned that unlike couples therapy, sometimes we're growing apart as human beings, and we need the flexibility in order to really see each other as founders, and the needs are different throughout the years of collaboration. But we mentioned that first they need to do it in speed in startups, so they don't have time. And second, they have lots of decisions. So how can you resolve a conflict related to a decision which is really important? It's not like something small. And each one of them do not agree. And of course, in many cases, they don't have any way to know which of the decisions is going to get to the right direction. So what would you do?
Yeah, so I don't think there's one way to make a decision, especially when it's three people. Sometimes it's easier in a three-way conversation when two people kind of tend to one decision and the third has a different opinion. It's very natural for three people to understand that two versus one, you go one way. I'll refer to challenges in a second. That's the basics. The default is two versus one goes one way, right? In a two-people team, it's more difficult sometimes. It's very natural to take the other position when someone says, hey, we should try to maybe change the pricing, and the other party says, no, I like the current pricing. You don't have data. You don't know what to base your decision on.
Sure.
Every one of the two is very convinced of his instinct. It's very difficult. So one way that you can use is, again, we mentioned angel investors. That's a very good way to use a trusted advisor, let's call it. Another way is trying. When you understand that a decision is not irreversible, you can try changing your pricing once, twice, three times. The best companies in the world do it. Again, when you're a young founder, maybe seem very critical and you're like, oh my God, if we do change our price tomorrow, we can never change them again. That's rarely the case, So when you understand a decision is not irreversible, that makes everything more simple. So maybe you can try. Another very useful tactic is to say, listen, I am going to assume that your instinct is right. Let's try to play the game of we made the decision the way you want it. What can go wrong? What can go right? If we find something that is a game changer, for the better or for the good, if your decision goes through and something goes very right, is this amazing? Okay, that's a good argument. If you go with your decision and something goes very badly and that kills us, that's a very important argument to consider. So playing the game of, okay, I'm with you. Let's see how this goes. Let's try to imagine the good and the bad scenarios. That's a very good tactic to use. But I want to say something. Never think that we can never be robots. Again, I started with ego. I'll always go back to that. When two people sit in a room, it's very hard to say, you know what, doesn't matter. No one says that. It does matter. It's your company. So again, respect and trust and have the ability to say, I lost this argument, but I trust my co-founder that he has the benefit of the company in mind, and we both don't know, and he understands that he doesn't know as well. When one party is very sure that he knows the truth, it also creates a lot of tension. So humility and be humble and be modest and know that you don't know everything. Try to consider the emotional state of your co-founder. Maybe it's a very important week for them. Maybe it's very stressful for them. Maybe they just had a very difficult meeting. They're upset. And at this time, maybe we should not talk right now. So to be aware, be considerate, be mindful of the other party. That's a very good line.
It sounds like going back to couple therapy. I know it's like that's what's
No,
come to
it's a
my
good
mind.
it's a good metaphor. It's the best
But
metaphor.
in couples therapy, usually it's not always there is a woman involved. In founders, okay, usually not always it's two men. Okay, that's the case. I'm
That's
not gonna.
the common case. It's
Yeah,
not the desired situation, but that's the
but
common
that's
case.
the most common case,
Yeah.
right? So, and what you're saying is like think about the emotional state, be flexible, empathic to the situation of the other, consider that you might be wrong. All of these things are not common for men in general,
Yeah.
but for
Yeah.
surely not for entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
So they need to be a very specific kind of man to take the chance of being an
You want me?
entrepreneur, right?
You know what? I haven't shared any personal story. I want to share a personal story about
Sure.
a huge mistake I made, specifically on what you just mentioned. When we started the second company, I said we were three co-founders and we had a bank account to the name of the company. Traditionally, to issue a credit card is on the name, is to the name of a specific person, even if it's on the account of the company, right?
Sure.
And we had two credit cards, one to my name and one to the name of one of my co-founders. And we were three. So there was one co-founder who did not have a credit card to their name. And again, we were young, three young males, a lot of testosterone and a lot of desire to succeed, but it's also involved with a lot of ego. And we, I think, wasted maybe 3 or 4 days arguing about should we issue a third credit card to the name of the third co-founder. And I was the CEO, I was in charge of those things, and I was against, to the point that I was like, guys, this is the most important thing we will ever make a decision about. We should not issue a third credit card. I had very good arguments, it doesn't matter. I was completely blind to the fact that there's one person in the room that feels that he is not trusted, that he is less important, that he is less core to the management of the company. It doesn't matter that all those things were not in reality. It doesn't matter that it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter that he could use the credit card that was written on my name and purchase anything he wanted. He didn't have to ask me or anything. It doesn't matter. What mattered is that he felt disregarded, and I was ignorant to the fact that he felt disregarded. And first of all, we wasted 4 days.
Yeah.
4 days, no one worked.
I'm amazed
Everybody
that you
was.
didn't think about it. Okay.
I cannot even describe in words how much the three of us felt that this is the most important decision we will ever make. 4 days, no one worked, we were all upset, we were nervous, we were screaming at each other. It was a terrible week.
Wow.
And eventually, the third co-founder said, you know what, guys, I'm making a decision. We're issuing the third credit card. We did it. Nothing bad happened, of course. So I'm telling this story specifically because it was my mistake. I don't like to talk about other people's mistake. I prefer to talk about my mistake. It was a huge blind spot for me. The lesson I'm taking from this is always, if you're many men are like me, naturally, as you mentioned in the classic heterosexual partnership, the man would be less mindful of the other party's feelings. So I'm really classic in that sense. I never consider instinctively the emotions of the other party. So what I learned from this, and if this could be maybe a good advice to people that are like me, the same way that you keep 10% of your mind to the well-being of your employees, 10% of your mind to the personal relationship with the investor, 10% of your mind to maybe creating a piggy bank for a catastrophe, 10% of your mind should go to be mindful to the feelings of your co-founder. 10% of your mind, you should say, and you know what? If you're a very technical person, if you're very practical and you never think about feelings, force yourself. Put 10% of your day, if you're working 10 hours a day, 1 hour of your day should go to be mindful of the well-being and the state of mind and the feelings of your co-founders. Go and have coffee together and ask them how they're doing, and ask them if they're stressed, and ask them if there's something that they need advice or they want to give you feedback on. You know what? Sometimes it will feel stupid. Sometimes it will feel like you're wasting your time, but it creates trust for the long term, and that is very, very important.
Yeah, I love the story, so thank you for that.
I should write about it, you know?
Yeah, sure, you should. Like 2 years back, I had a presentation, and the talk was about traits, characteristics, personal traits of entrepreneurs. And in order for them to be successful and to be unique, and most people are not entrepreneurs, most people would decide to be an employee, and maybe they will start a small business, but surely not a startup. And in order to be that person, to create a startup and to go through all the ups and downs of a startup, you need a set of qualities, right? And sometimes there are very big qualities, keeping motivated when things are tough, right? For example. On the other side, in order to do so, you need to be very focused and to see something very narrow, which is, this is my goal, I'm gonna get it, it doesn't matter, everything aside, this is what I want to reach. And people who have this capacity, in many cases, will not have the capacity to just, relax and think about the complex emotional situation of people around them, because it will distract them from getting their goals. So what you're saying is a bit like, I think, counterintuitive for some people when they just imagine what being a founder is. And I think it demands from them to see things in a different perspective from what they expected.
Yeah, I think, you know what? Being a founder is an immersive, holistic experience. Earlier, you asked, what should someone expect? You should expect it to take control of your life, to take over your life. You should expect it to influence your relationship with your partner. You should expect it to influence your sleep, your nutrition. You should expect it to be good and bad. If you succeed, it will change your life. If you fail, there's a good chance it will change your life as well. So you should expect it to be everything for you for a while. And that's just the more reason to be mindful. I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, but it's important.
No, it's okay.
It's just a more reason to be mindful of the state of mind of your co-founder, because it's also something that's taking control of his life or hers.
Sure. It's tough. It's tough to be.
Yeah.
And I think that Elon Musk mentioned that it's like eating glass, right? Did you hear that he said? Yeah, and he said he would not suggest this kind of life to anyone, being Elon Musk. This is what he mentioned. What factors determine startup survival after founders' conflict?
I think the time that was spent on not working, the speed, if you manage to arrive at a peaceful solution fast, that's a huge benefit, a huge advantage, a huge bump to your chances to survive for the company. And it doesn't matter. Sometimes one founder will leave. Maybe they will all stay together. Maybe, again, I said the very common solution is for one founder to leave and remain a shareholder. If you do it fast. Because if you wasted 2 or 3 months not working, that's already a death blow. That's the most important factor, I think.
I see.
And the second most important factor is not creating very, very bad blood, someone that's after the company trying to ruin to the other party. That's obviously very important.
Yeah. There is a couple, American Jewish couple, who's doing couple therapy. And they have like 4 signs of couples that have higher rates of future divorce. And one of the things that they mention is contempt. When I despise you, I don't trust you, and I don't care about you even. And I guess that when founders get to that point that they don't value and they don't even respect the other side, it's very hard to go back to the situation of trust.
If you got to that point, then again, if you got to that point where the trust is broken and you despise the other person, the most important thing is to solve it fast. One party would have to leave for sure. You cannot fix that. Do it as fast as you can and try to arrive at a solution where the parties are at least not hating each other anymore. If you're not at that point, if you were smart enough to try to solve your situation before it gets to that point, then maybe you can stay working together. And I had many, many cases that people remained working together. Maybe they changed their dynamics, maybe they changed roles, maybe one party had to take some time off or something. But if the trust is broken, solve it as fast as you can, separate. And In a romantic relationship, there is more, I think, the number of possibilities greater.
Why?
I don't know. It's just my sense. I don't do family mediation. I never
No, I'm just
did.
thinking that it's like
But
it's the same amount of possibilities,
yeah,
like staying together for good or for bad, or divorcing, separating. Like
I think for
you could take
couples,
an open marriage, maybe. I don't
yeah, no,
know.
but for couples, no, I'm talking about the interim
Yeah,
options, right? For
yeah.
couples, I know couples that have been together for maybe a full year where they slept in separate rooms and it took them a full year to get back together and they never separated. They were just um, a bit
Far from each
distant,
other.
you know.
Yeah.
Two co-founders, I don't think that's possible to work for a full year in a
Uh-huh.
in-between situation.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just my sense. I wasn't. It's not something I can base
Yeah.
on statistics.
So before we end, I have one more question. But before that, do you have some kind of a story about founders that you work with and you learned from something from them?
I try to learn a lot from everybody. A story about something I learned from other people. First of all, I have to say that the two people I learned most from are my co-founders. And I always say that we had a very intense relationship. We had a very emotional relationship. And it taught me a lot about dealing with conflicts. We had many, many conflicts. It was not a smooth relationship by any mean. I learned a lot from them. So that's always when people ask me about learning, fighting with someone, getting angry at someone, it doesn't mean that you can't learn from them.
Sure.
I think that there was two founders that I worked with that they had a kind of tease between them, and that tease they used it to never give up because they say I'm not going to give up, so he can tell me that gave up. And at the good times, in the good periods, it's very optimistic. I'm not going to give up, so I don't let him down. I'm not going to give up, so because I want to support him, I want to help him. And in the bad times, it's the other way around. I'm not going to give up because I won't let him see me give up. That's a very interesting dynamic. It creates a lot of motivation. It's very delicate. Sometimes
Yeah.
it doesn't work that well. But we're talking about in this conversation a lot about dynamics. Every two people have their own dynamic. You can never judge. You can never. It's not that one relationship is better than the other.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on the parties.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that you would mention something related to humor. I think that talking
Mm.
about men are very good at humor and solving conflicts with humor.
It's a very interesting thought. I don't think, I'm trying to think of the best founders I know. None of them have a very good, none of them is
Really?
very funny. Some of them have very good humor and they can laugh and they can understand humor, but none of them is very
No,
funny. I don't know.
no, I meant the humor between founders, like what you mentioned. It's
Yeah,
like, yeah, I can
yeah,
see that he's wrong, but I'm laughing about it. Like it's a way to slick things in order not to go into the corners, right? Because it's like, yeah, it's not that important. That's what I
interesting.
would think,
You know
but
what?
maybe I'm wrong.
It's the first time I think about humor in this context. I would say that from my experience, co-founders are less using humor less than the average person.
Really? Wow.
My sense.
Wow. Well,
You
so
know
I'm
what?
sure that you're right. You know, when I'm thinking about the founders that I work with, of course, I think that even no, almost all of them are men.
Yeah,
They need to be very focused. So when you're focused, and you need to be very driven and focused and motivated and everything. And when you're too focused, you
yeah,
cannot have any humor because
yeah.
humor is something very open-minded, and it's like, and you don't look serious when you're
Exactly. There's a sense of self-importance that comes with when you run a company. You have to think that you're very important. Why would this someone give me his money? Because I'm very important. And that kind of contradicts humor. For humor, you need to have some kind of self-awareness. I'm not that important to make fun of myself.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't sit that well.
You know, it reminds me of Yoni Bloch. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I follow him. He's a very interesting
yeah.
person.
And he said that once he went to a VC and he talked about, like, his speech, and he said something with the humor in the end. He said, like, but don't trust me, I don't know,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
something like that. And one of the investors came to him and he said, never say it. Like, it doesn't matter. Never say it because it's not funny. If you want to get my money, I want you to be serious. So I think it's maybe it's related to what you said
Yeah,
in that
I think
aspect.
so. I agree with that sense. I think the good founders are very self-centered, some of them, most of them, and it doesn't work well with humor.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but we have other
Unfortunately.
people that are funny.
Of course, of course. Okay, so what's your number one tip for entrepreneurs?
I gave so many tips. Now I have to, I gave more tips than I used to. I think that try to focus and separate the important and the strategic from the not tactical small decision. Try to focus much energy on what's important and as less energy as you can on what's not strategic. Give up on a small decision. It doesn't matter. Most of the things you're talking about, you will not remember in a week, including fighting. If you're in a situation of disagreement, try to move on as fast as you can, and yeah, try to remember that your ego is a tool. It helps you in business, but it disrupts your relationships. So when you're inside a situation that is a human relationship, put your ego aside. Keep it for the sales pitches and for where it helps.
Yeah. Thank you, Amit. And where could people hear more about you and your work?
Right, I have a newsletter that I write in Hebrew about conflicts and resolving conflicts. I write in English and on Medium, but if someone wants to stay in touch, you can on LinkedIn. You can see my newsletter and register. It's I would be happy.
Sure. And thank you, Amit, for your time. It's been very interesting and
It
fun to
was
talk to
great.
you.
Thank you so much. You had very good questions. I really had a good time.
Thank you, Amit. And to all of you change makers out there, thank you for joining us. I invite you to sign up to my new online leaders program, Unlocking the Power of Generative AI, designed to equip leaders with the skills to build successful generative AI products. And I'll see you next week with another innovative, insightful talk. See ya.
Bye.